Before the first human ever opened their eyes, something else was already watching. Ancient myths, forbidden texts, and forgotten tablets speak of demon creatures that existed before humanity itself, beings born from chaos, fire, and shadow, long before law, morality, or time had fully formed. These entities were not fallen angels, nor monsters created to haunt us. They were the original inhabitants of a world that came before ours. Tonight, we journey into that lost age, when demons ruled the earth, shaped reality, and were later erased from history. Thank you for joining us. Your curiosity keeps these forgotten truths alive. The primordial chaos beasts. Before humanity lifted its eyes to the heavens, before language gave shape to fear or worship, existence itself was unstable. Creation, as many ancient traditions describe it, did not begin in peace but in turbulence, a vast, formless chaos where boundaries had not yet been drawn. From this primordial disorder emerged beings that were neither gods nor animals, neither spirits nor matter alone. They were the primordial chaos beasts, entities born not of intention, but of imbalance. Across civilizations separated by oceans and millennia, remarkably similar myths appear. These stories speak of monstrous beings that existed before the ordered world, creatures that embodied darkness, hunger, storm, abyss, and dissolution. They were not evil in the moral sense humanity would later define, but they were hostile to structure, life, and meaning. To early minds, chaos itself was alive, and it had teeth. In Mesopotamian cosmology, the earliest written civilization we know, chaos took the form of Tiamat, the primordial saltwater dragon. She was not merely a monster but the living embodiment of pre-creation chaos. From her body came the first gods, yet when order began to form, Tiamat turned against it. She birthed an army of grotesque beings, serpent dragons, scorpion men, lion demons, creatures designed not to rule the world, but to unmake it. These chaos beasts were described as ancient even to the gods themselves, older than divine law, older than fate. In the Hebrew tradition, echoes of these beings appear in shadowed language. Before God speaks light into existence in Genesis, the earth is described as tohu wa bohu, formless and void, with darkness upon the face of the deep. Later texts and poetic passages hint at monstrous forces lurking in that deep, Leviathan, Rariab, and unnamed dragons of the sea. These were not animals but cosmic adversaries, symbols of untamed creation that had to be subdued before the world could function. The act of creation was not just building, it was containment. Egyptian mythology offers another vision. Before the sun rose for the first time, there was Nun, the endless dark waters. Within Nun dwelled Apep, or Apophis, a colossal serpent of chaos whose sole purpose was to devour order. Each night, as the sun god Ra journeyed through the underworld, Apep attempted to consume him, threatening to plunge the cosmos back into primordial darkness. Apep was not created, he simply was. An eternal remnant of chaos that could never be fully destroyed, only resisted. These myths suggest a disturbing idea: chaos was not eliminated at creation. It was imprisoned, wounded, or pushed to the margins. The primordial chaos beasts did not vanish, they retreated. In Greek myth, Typhon represents this concept vividly. Born from Gaia in a last attempt to overthrow the Olympian order, Typhon was described as a being so vast that his head brushed the stars and his lower body coiled through the underworld. From his shoulders erupted countless serpent heads, each speaking in different voices, animal roars, human screams, divine whispers. Typhon was not merely a monster, he was the embodiment of everything that existed before law, reason, and civilization. When Zeus finally defeated him, Typhon was buried beneath the earth, trapped but alive. Earthquakes and volcanic eruptions were believed to be his movements, reminders that chaos still breathed beneath reality. In Norse cosmology, the chaos beasts take on a colder, more fatalistic tone. Ymir, the primordial giant, was born from the collision of fire and ice in the void of Ginnungagap. From Ymir's body came the frost giants, forces of entropy and destruction that the gods would forever struggle against. When Odin and his brothers slew Ymir and used his corpse to build the world, they did not erase chaos, they built order on top of it. Even then, creatures like Jormungandr, the world serpent, remained, coiled around the earth, destined to rise again at Ragnarok and drag creation back into chaos. What unites these stories is not just monstrous imagery, but a shared belief: existence is fragile. Order is temporary. Beneath reality lies something older, angrier, and incomprehensible. Some ancient texts go further, implying that these chaos beasts were not mindless. They were aware. In certain Gnostic traditions and later occult interpretations, primordial entities are described as possessing a kind of alien intelligence, consciousness without empathy, purpose without morality. They did not hate humanity specifically, humanity simply represented order, limitation, and meaning. To a chaos beast, these were offenses against the natural state of the universe. This may explain why later demonologies often trace demons back to pre-human origins. Rather than fallen angels alone, some traditions suggest demons are the fragmented remnants of these chaos beings, shattered, diminished, but still hostile. Where a chaos beast once sought to swallow the cosmos, a demon now whispers madness, temptation, or destruction on a smaller scale. The threat is reduced, but the nature remains. Psychologically, these beasts may represent humanity's earliest confrontation with the unknown. Before science, before maps, before certainty, the world was dangerous and indifferent. Storms destroyed villages. Darkness hid predators. The ocean swallowed ships without explanation. To survive, early humans gave these forces names and faces. But the consistency of these myths across cultures suggests something deeper than metaphor. It suggests a shared ancestral memory, a sense that the universe itself was once hostile, and may be again. Even today, the language persists. We speak of chaos as if it is alive. We describe disasters as if they have intent. In horror fiction and modern cosmic mythology, ancient beings slumber beneath the world, waiting for the stars to align. These are not new ideas, they are echoes. The primordial chaos beasts were never meant to be understood, only restrained. They existed before morality, before humanity, before even the gods in some traditions. And though myth tells us they were defeated, buried, or bound, it never claims they were destroyed. The shadow spirits of Sumer. Long before the rise of classical demons and angels, before names like Lucifer or Beelzebub ever took shape, the ancient Sumerians spoke of beings that existed in the dim space between gods and humans, entities not born of rebellion, but of imbalance. These were the shadow spirits of Sumer, unseen forces believed to drift through deserts, ruins, sick rooms, and dreams. They were not always evil in the modern sense, but they were feared, respected, and ritually confronted. To the Sumerian mind, the universe was fragile, and these spirits were cracks in its design. Sumer, flourishing in Mesopotamia around 3500 BCE, produced the earliest known written records of supernatural beings. Clay tablets inscribed with cuneiform speak not only of gods and kings, but of spirits that stalked humanity when divine order weakened. Unlike later demonologies that framed evil as a moral rebellion, Sumerian shadow spirits were often the byproducts of cosmic disorder, leftovers from creation, death, or divine neglect. Among the most feared of these entities was the Utukku. Utukku were ambiguous spirits, neither fully malevolent nor benevolent. Some served the gods, acting as enforcers of divine punishment, while others roamed freely, spreading illness and madness. What made the Utukku terrifying was their invisibility. Texts describe them as having no mouth, no limbs, no face, yet they could suffocate sleepers, infect blood, and twist thoughts. You could not bargain with an Utukku, only repel it through ritual. To the Sumerians, this made them especially dangerous, a threat without form or intention. Closely related were the Giddim, also known as Atemu, the restless dead. These were human spirits who failed to reach the underworld properly, often due to improper burial, violent death, or neglect by descendants. Unlike later ghosts who haunt specific places, the Giddim were believed to wander widely, driven by hunger and resentment. They clung to the living, draining vitality and causing sickness. Nightmares, depression, and unexplained fevers were often attributed to their presence. What is striking is how psychological the Giddim concept is. Sumerian texts describe them whispering regrets into the ears of the living, replaying unresolved emotions. In this sense, the Giddim were not merely supernatural threats, they were embodiments of guilt, memory, and social failure. To forget the dead was to risk being consumed by them. More overtly monstrous were the Galu, brutal underworld enforcers serving Ereshkigal, goddess of the dead. The Galu were abductors, dragging gods and humans alike into the depths of Ker, the Sumerian underworld. In the myth of Inanna's descent, Galu pursue the goddess relentlessly, indifferent to mercy or pleading. They are described as relentless, tireless, and utterly alien, beings who do not eat, drink, or rest. The Galu represent something rare in early demonology, predatory inevitability. They are not tricksters or tempters. They do not corrupt, they collect. Their terror lies in certainty. Once marked, escape is nearly impossible. This concept echoes forward into later traditions of death demons and psychopomps, but the Galu lack compassion or guidance. They are shadows with a task, not a conscience. Another shadow spirit feared in Sumer was Asag, also called Azag, a monstrous entity associated with disease and environmental corruption. Asag was said to rise from the depths of the earth, bringing with him poisoned waters, failed crops, and burning fevers. In myth, Asag is defeated by the god Ninurta, but even in defeat, his presence lingers in the land. Mountains formed from his body, and sickness remained as a reminder. Asag is significant because he blurs the line between demon and natural disaster. He is not merely a creature, but a personification of ecological collapse. To the Sumerians, plague and drought were not random, they were spiritual events, signs that something ancient and hostile had stirred beneath the world. Hovering at the edges of Sumerian belief was Lilitu, a wind spirit associated with storms, sexuality, and infant mortality. While later traditions would reshape her into Lilith, a singular demoness, in Sumer she was one of many Lilu spirits, dangerous, seductive, and untamed. Lilitu was believed to slip through windows at night, riding the desert winds. She targeted the vulnerable, newborns, pregnant women, and lone men. Lilitu embodies fear of the unknown night, of desire, vulnerability, and uncontrollable forces. She was not evil by intent but lethal by nature. Amulets and incantations were used to ward her off, not destroy her. This is a recurring theme in Sumerian demonology. Shadow spirits were rarely annihilated. They were managed, appeased, redirected. What unites all these beings is their origin. The shadow spirits of Sumer were not fallen angels or rebels against a supreme god. They existed because the universe itself was unstable. Creation was not perfect. Death leaked. The gods were powerful, but not omnipotent. In this worldview, evil was not a moral failure, it was entropy. To live in Sumer was to live under constant supernatural pressure. Every illness, nightmare, or misfortune carried the possibility of spiritual intrusion. Priests acted as exorcists, healers, and interpreters of the unseen. Incantation tablets reveal detailed rituals meant to identify which spirit was responsible for an affliction. Naming the entity was the first step toward survival. These shadow spirits set the foundation for all later demonologies. The Hebrew Shedim, the Greek daimon, and even modern concepts of possession echo Sumerian fears. The idea that unseen forces influence thought, health, and fate begins here, in the mud brick cities along the Euphrates. The Sumerians did not ask whether shadow spirits existed. They asked only how close they were, and what price must be paid to keep them away. The Djinn before Adam. Before clay was shaped into Adam and breath was placed within him, the universe of Islamic cosmology speaks of another intelligent creation that walked the earth, whispered through deserts, and burned unseen in the night air, the Djinn. Neither angels nor humans, the Djinn occupy a liminal space between the material and the unseen, a forgotten age of creation that predates humanity itself. Their story is not merely folklore, but a metaphysical explanation for chaos, free will, and the ancient scars etched into the world before mankind ever opened its eyes. According to the Quran, the Djinn were created from Nar Samum, a smokeless, scorching fire, long before Adam was fashioned from clay. This fire was not the flame of destruction but of motion, volatility, and awareness. Unlike angels, who were created from light and bound to obedience, Djinn were given freedom of choice. They could believe or rebel, build or destroy, worship or deny. In this freedom lay both their greatness and their downfall. Early Islamic traditions and Tafsir literature describe a primeval earth ruled not by humans, but by Djinn civilizations. These beings formed tribes, built kingdoms, and developed cultures invisible to human eyes. They traveled freely across land and sea, shaping environments and influencing the unseen layers of reality. Some were righteous, devoted to worship and harmony with divine order. Others succumbed to arrogance, violence, and bloodshed. The earth, it is said, became soaked with corruption long before human sin was ever conceived. This ancient chaos prompted divine intervention. Islamic narrations describe how angels were sent to wage war against the rebellious Djinn, driving them into desolate regions, remote deserts, mountain peaks, deep forests, and abandoned ruins. These locations would later become associated with hauntings and supernatural fear. The world was cleansed, but not emptied. The Djinn remained, hidden behind a veil, now sharing the planet rather than ruling it. Among the Djinn of this early age was a being of exceptional status, Iblis. Contrary to popular misconception, Iblis was not an angel who fell, but a Djinn who rose. His devotion was so intense that he was elevated among the ranks of angels, worshipping alongside them in the heavens. He embodied the paradox of Djinn nature, free will combined with spiritual ambition. Yet it was this same free will that would lead to his eternal curse. When God announced the creation of Adam, a being molded from clay and destined to become a vicegerent upon earth, the cosmic order shifted. The angels questioned, but obeyed. Iblis, however, refused. His reasoning was rooted in pride and primordial hierarchy. Fire, he believed, was superior to clay. The Djinn who once ruled the earth could not accept subservience to a creature of dust. In that moment, ancient resentment surfaced, the memory of Djinn dominion, the loss of their world, and the rise of humanity as heirs to creation. Iblis's defiance marked a turning point not only for him but for all Djinn. Cast out and cursed, he vowed to mislead humanity until the end of time. Yet his rebellion was not an anomaly, it was the ultimate expression of Djinn free will. Where angels submit, Djinn choose. Where humans forget, Djinn remember. They remember the world before Adam. Islamic tradition maintains that Djinn still inhabit the earth, existing in a parallel dimension that intersects with ours. They eat, drink, marry, and die. Some follow prophets, including Muhammad, while others remain hostile, deceptive, or indifferent to humanity. They can inspire creativity or madness, whisper wisdom or delusion. This ambiguity makes them neither purely demonic nor benevolent, but profoundly complex. The pre-Adamic age of the Djinn also offers a deeper theological lesson. Humanity is not the first intelligent creation to walk the earth. We are inheritors, not pioneers. The ruins beneath myth and memory, lost cities, forbidden zones, cursed places echo the idea that civilizations can rise and fall long before recorded history begins. The Djinn stand as a warning: intelligence does not guarantee righteousness, and power does not ensure permanence. Some scholars interpret the Djinn narrative symbolically, seeing them as representations of primal forces, subconscious drives, or pre-human intelligences. Others maintain their literal existence, citing consistent descriptions across centuries of Islamic scholarship. Regardless of interpretation, the role of the Djinn before Adam reframes humanity's position in the cosmos. We are not alone, not first, and not uncontested. In this sense, the story of the Djinn is not merely about supernatural beings, but about succession, responsibility, and humility. Adam was not created into a vacant world but into a layered reality marked by ancient conflict and unseen inhabitants. Humanity's trial was never meant to be easy. We inherited a world already scarred by free will. And somewhere, just beyond perception, the Djinn still watch. They remember a time when the earth answered to fire instead of flesh, when Adam was not yet named, and the world belonged to something older, unseen, and restless. Leviathan's forgotten kin. Long before Leviathan coiled through the depths of biblical imagination, it was never alone. Ancient texts, fragmented myths, and half-erased cosmologies whisper of other colossal beings, entities born of the same primordial chaos, now relegated to the margins of memory. These were Leviathan's forgotten kin, creatures of sea, abyss, storm, and void, whose names faded as monotheism narrowed the monstrous pantheon, yet whose shadows still ripple through scripture, folklore, and collective fear. To understand these beings, we must return to the ancient worldview where chaos was not abstract, but alive. Chaos as a living bloodline. In the ancient Near East, chaos was genealogical. Monsters did not merely exist, they descended from older forces. Before creation was ordered, chaos bred. Waters gave birth to waters, darkness spawned darker things. Leviathan in Hebrew, was only one heir in a monstrous lineage tied to the deep. Biblical poetry hints at this plurality. Psalm 74 speaks not of a single beast, but of the heads of the sea monsters, crushed by God. Job describes Leviathan in intimate detail, yet Isaiah expands the vision: Leviathan the fleeing serpent, Leviathan the twisting serpent, and the dragon that is in the sea. 3 forms. 1 name. Many manifestations. This multiplicity implies kinship, related entities sharing essence, if not form. Rariab, the broken queen of the deep. Among Leviathan's closest forgotten kin is Rariab, not the woman of Jericho, but the ancient chaos dragon. In Job 26 verse 12 and Isaiah 51 verse 9, Rariab is a cosmic force shattered by God during creation. She represents the arrogant, raging sea before it was subdued. Unlike Leviathan, Rariab is never described physically in detail. She is abstraction given life, chaos personified as rebellion. Some scholars believe Rariab predates Leviathan in Israelite tradition, later demoted as theology shifted away from multiple chaos beings toward a single symbolic monster. In earlier mythic layers, Lurked may have been the matriarch, Leviathan's elder, or even its progenitor. Behemoth, the earthbound twin. If Leviathan ruled the sea, Behemoth ruled the land. Mentioned alongside Leviathan in Job 40-41, Behemoth is often misunderstood as a hippopotamus. Yet the text resists reduction. Behemoth is described as the first of God's works, a creature whose strength is in its loins, whose bones are like bronze, and whose presence reshapes the landscape. Ancient Jewish tradition viewed Behemoth and Leviathan as paired titans, land and sea embodiments of chaos. Some Second Temple texts even describe an eschatological future where both beasts are slain at the end of days, their flesh consumed by the righteous. This was not zoology. It was cosmic balance. Behemoth and Leviathan were siblings, divided not by allegiance, but by domain. Lotan, the Canaanite original. Long before Leviathan entered Hebrew scripture, there was Lotan. In the Ugaritic texts of ancient Canaan, Lotan is a seven-headed sea serpent defeated by the storm god Baal. The parallels are unmistakable, a twisting serpent, many-headed, dwelling in the deep. Linguistically, Lotan and Leviathan are almost identical. Here, Leviathan's kin are not hidden, they are ancestral. The biblical authors inherited an existing myth and reshaped it. What was once Baal's enemy became Yahweh's. What was once a pantheon battle became a singular divine triumph. Lotan was not erased, it was absorbed. Tiamat, the distant ancestor. Travel east, and the lineage deepens. In Babylonian mythology, Tiamat is the mother of monsters, a saltwater dragon who births chaos itself. She spawned serpents, scorpion men, and storm beasts before being slain by Marduk, who fashions the world from her corpse. Though not named in the Bible, Tiamat's DNA runs through every biblical chaos monster. Leviathan's watery nature, Lurked's defiance, Behemoth's primal strength, all echo Tiamat's legacy. If Leviathan has kin, Tiamat is the forgotten grandmother. Yam, Mot, and the abyssal court. Other figures linger at the edges of scripture: Yam, the sea god defeated by Baal, Mot, god of death and drought, and the nameless dragons of the deep, mentioned fleetingly in Genesis and Psalms. These were not demons in the later Christian sense, but cosmic forces, rulers of domains before moral categories hardened. As Israelite theology evolved, these beings were demoted from gods to monsters, from monsters to metaphors, and finally to symbols of chaos conquered by divine order. Yet demotion does not mean extinction. Why they were forgotten? Leviathan's kin were not forgotten by accident. They were buried intentionally. As monotheism solidified, multiplicity became dangerous. Many monsters implied many powers. To preserve divine singularity, chaos had to be centralized. Leviathan became the sole representative of everything untamed, absorbing the traits of its siblings. Lurked faded. Lotan was renamed. Behemoth was tamed by allegory. Tiamat was exiled beyond scripture. But traces remain, fractured verses, poetic pluralities, echoes in apocalyptic visions. The kin still lurk. In modern storytelling, Leviathan's forgotten kin resurface constantly. Godzilla, Chulhu, apocalyptic beasts rising from land and sea, these are not inventions. They are resurrections. Humanity never truly forgot these beings. We simply changed their names. Leviathan's kin still inhabit the depths of our myths, our fears, and our apocalyptic dreams. They remind us that before order, there was family, monstrous, vast, and waiting. The Proto-Demons of Egypt. Long before demons were framed as rebels against a singular god or exiles from heaven, ancient Egypt imagined hostile forces in a far more complex way. Evil was not a single army marching against creation, it was entropy, imbalance, hunger, disease, darkness, and the terrifying uncertainty of the unseen. What modern audiences might call demons, the Egyptians understood as proto-demons, semi-divine beings, spirits, and monsters that existed to test, punish, or consume those who strayed from cosmic order. These entities were not always evil in the modern sense. Many served necessary functions within the universe itself. At the heart of Egyptian belief was Ma'at, cosmic balance, truth, and order. Everything that threatened Ma'at became, by definition, monstrous. The proto-demons of Egypt were not fallen angels but manifestations of chaos itself, birthed from the primordial abyss known as Nun, the watery nothingness that existed before creation. From this chaos came gods, but also things that gods struggled to control. Chaos given form, the nature of Egyptian demons. Egyptian proto-demons were rarely independent agents of rebellion. Instead, they were instruments of consequence. They punished the wicked in the afterlife, spread illness among the living, guarded forbidden thresholds, or hunted souls that lacked protection. Unlike later demonologies, these beings did not tempt humanity, they devoured it. Many proto-demons were described as hybrid creatures, part animal, part human, part divine. This fragmentation reflected their role as beings that existed between categories, neither fully god nor fully mortal. They inhabited liminal spaces, tombs, deserts, night hours, and the duat, the Egyptian underworld. Importantly, Egyptians did not deny their existence or try to banish them entirely. Instead, they named them, painted them on tomb walls, and inscribed spells against them. To know a demon's name was to limit its power. Apep, the Primordial devourer. No proto-demon embodies Egyptian chaos more completely than Apep, Apophis. A colossal serpent born from the primal waters, Apep was not merely evil, he was anti-creation. Each night, as the sun god Ra journeyed through the underworld, Apep attempted to swallow the solar bark and plunge the universe back into darkness. Apep was never worshipped. He was feared, cursed, stabbed ritually by priests who reenacted his defeat through spells and effigies. Yet despite endless defeats, Apep was never destroyed. His continued existence symbolized a terrifying truth: chaos can be restrained, but never erased. In later demonology, Apep's traits echo in the concept of the eternal adversary, a being doomed to lose yet never cease to exist. He is not fallen, he simply is. Amit, the Soul Eater. Perhaps the most famous Egyptian proto-demon is Amit, the devourer of the dead. With the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus, the three most dangerous animals known to Egyptians, Amit waited beside the scales of judgment. When a soul's heart was weighed against the feather of Marat and found wanting, Amit consumed it entirely. There was no hellfire, no eternal torment, only absolute annihilation. To be eaten by Amit was to be erased from existence forever. Amit did not judge. She did not choose. She simply fulfilled her function. This makes her one of the purest examples of a proto-demon, a being of destruction without malice, horror without intent. In later religious traditions, the idea of total soul destruction would be replaced with eternal punishment, but Amit represents a far older fear, non-being. The slaughterers and the wandering dead. Beyond singular monsters, Egyptian texts speak of demonic hosts, groups of beings often called the slaughterers, the butchers, or the decapitated. These entities roamed the underworld armed with knives, hooks, and fire, punishing oath-breakers, blasphemers, and those who failed ritual purity. Some demons were believed to be dead souls that failed judgment, twisted into predators. Others were servants of gods like Sekhmet, unleashed during plagues or wars. In this way, Egyptian proto-demons blurred the line between divine punishment and spiritual infection. Illness itself was often attributed to demonic intrusion. Headaches, nightmares, fevers, and madness were thought to be caused by spirits entering the body. Medical texts frequently combine treatments with exorcistic spells, revealing how closely demons were tied to the physical world. Guardians, not just monsters. Not all proto-demons were enemies. Many served as gatekeepers to sacred or forbidden realms. The underworld was filled with doors guarded by terrifying beings whose names and forms had to be known precisely. If approached correctly, these demons allowed passage. If not, they destroyed the soul. This idea would later influence Gnostic, Jewish, and Islamic demonologies, where angels and demons guard thresholds of heaven, hell, and hidden knowledge. In Egypt, the monster was not always the villain, it was often the test. Legacy of the Egyptian proto-demons. The Egyptian understanding of demonic forces predates the moral dualism of later religions. There was no singular Satan figure ruling hell. Instead, there were countless manifestations of chaos, decay, and consequence. These beings did not rebel against God, they existed because the universe required opposition to order. This worldview deeply influenced later cultures. Hebrew texts absorbed Egyptian imagery during the Exodus period. Greek writers reinterpreted Egyptian monsters through their own myths. Even Christian demonology inherited the idea of the underworld as a place of gates, judges, devourers, and fiery enforcers. The proto-demons of Egypt remind us that humanity's fear of darkness did not begin with rebellion, it began with balance. Chaos was not evil because it hated order. It was evil because without it, order had no meaning. And somewhere in the cosmic night, as the sun still rises each morning, the ancient serpent waits, wounded, defeated, but never gone. Less. The spirits of the void in Eastern myth. Long before humans walked the lands, myths from the East spoke of primordial spirits dwelling in the vast emptiness beyond existence, the void. Unlike the demonic entities of Western lore, which were often tied to rebellion, sin, or punishment, these spirits were less moralized and more elemental. They were forces of nature, chaos, and cosmic balance. In Chinese, Japanese, and Southeast Asian traditions, the void was not merely nothingness, it was the fertile space of creation, a liminal realm where the boundaries between life, death, and the supernatural blurred. In early Chinese cosmology, the concept of Hundun emerges as one of the most enigmatic figures associated with the void. Hundun is described in texts such as the Zhuangzi as a faceless, chaotic entity, neither male nor female, embodying primordial chaos itself. It exists before the creation of heaven and earth, a formless mass from which order eventually emerges. Philosophers debated Hundun's nature for centuries. Some saw it as a cosmic trickster, others as the ultimate source of life and energy. What is striking is that Hundun was not inherently evil, its chaotic nature was indifferent, yet terrifying, because humans could neither predict nor control it. Hundun's void-like essence reflects an early Eastern understanding of the cosmos as an interplay between form and formlessness, life and death, presence and absence. Moving eastward to Japan, the concept of the void takes on spiritual dimensions through the beliefs surrounding yokai and kami. While many yokai are mischievous or malevolent, some are thought to originate from the spaces between worlds, the voids of perception and memory. For example, the Noprobo, faceless spirits, wander silently, appearing as ordinary humans until their true form is revealed. Like Hundun, these spirits embody the unknowable and unstructured, serving as reminders that the world is not always orderly or comprehensible. Similarly, the Japanese Buddhist concept of mu, meaning nothingness or non-being, reflects a philosophical embrace of emptiness as a space of potential rather than absence. Spirits associated with mu were believed to occupy transitional realms, guiding souls between existence and oblivion, influencing fate, and shaping the material world in subtle, unseen ways. Southeast Asian traditions, particularly in Thailand and Cambodia, contain their own interpretations of void-like spirits. Among the Khmer, the Preta, or hungry ghosts, are restless entities inhabiting the fringes of existence, often residing in spaces abandoned by humans or neglected by nature. These spirits are trapped in a perpetual state of longing and emptiness, their very existence defined by the void between desire and fulfillment. In Thai folklore, the Phai Tai Hong, the spirits of those who suffered violent or premature deaths, are said to linger in liminal spaces, neither fully in the mortal world nor entirely in the afterlife. The Eastern void is not a place of punishment like the Christian hell, it is a threshold where energy, memory, and consciousness intermingle, creating entities that humans can sense but rarely understand fully. One of the most fascinating aspects of Eastern void spirits is their role in the natural and cosmic order. Unlike Western demons, which often act as agents of chaos or moral corruption, these entities are more neutral, sometimes helpful, sometimes dangerous, but always reflective of a greater balance. In Daoist and Shinto traditions, failing to respect these spaces could invite misfortune. Forests, caves, abandoned temples, and riverbanks were often regarded as portals to the void, where spirits might emerge if humans encroached carelessly. Offerings, rituals, and symbolic boundaries served as methods to navigate this invisible terrain safely. Art and literature further reveal the pervasiveness of void spirits in Eastern imagination. In Japanese no theater, masks of faceless ghosts or horned spirits convey both fear and the sublime, embodying the liminality of existence. Chinese ink paintings of mist-shrouded mountains and empty lakes evoke a similar emptiness, suggesting the presence of unseen forces in the voids of nature. These cultural expressions hint at a worldview where the unknown is not necessarily evil but profoundly influential, a canvas upon which human fate, natural phenomena, and cosmic rhythms are painted. Even more intriguing is the psychological dimension of void spirits. Scholars of Eastern philosophy have noted that these entities often symbolize internal states as much as external ones. The faceless yokai, the insatiable Preta, and the chaotic Hundun can be interpreted as metaphors for human anxiety, longing, and the struggle to confront the unknown. In this sense, the spirits of the void are both literal and figurative. They are beings that populate the edges of existence and projections of the human mind grappling with emptiness. Encounters with such spirits in folklore often serve as lessons, warning humans to approach the unknown with humility, reflection, and awareness. Ultimately, the spirits of the void in Eastern myth challenge modern assumptions about what a demon is. They are not purely evil, nor are they always harmful. They are, instead, reminders of the cosmic balance between presence and absence, form and chaos, life and death. These entities existed before humans had names for them, and their stories continue to resonate precisely because they inhabit the mysterious spaces we cannot fully control or comprehend. By exploring the void through these myths, we gain insight into how ancient peoples understood the boundaries of reality itself, and how they grappled with the silent, unseen forces that shaped the world before humanity ever arrived. The pre-human demons of Africa. Long before humanity walked the African savannas and forests, legends tell of beings that roamed these lands, creatures neither fully divine nor entirely mortal. African oral traditions, some predating recorded history, describe entities whose existence preceded humans, and whose shadowy influence would later ripple through human imagination. These were the pre-human demons of Africa, spirits of chaos, hunger, and power that shaped landscapes and molded early human fears. In the forests of Central Africa, the pygmy community spoke of Mokelmbembe, often described as a gigantic, reptilian creature. While today it is often associated with cryptozoology and mistaken for a dinosaur relic, older oral accounts framed it differently, as a guardian of primordial rivers, a force of nature capable of unleashing wrath upon any who dared disturb the balance of the wild. Some elders suggested that Mokelmbembe's power did not stem from flesh and bone alone. It was imbued with the essence of the pre-human realm, a time when the world was not yet ruled by the fragile hands of humanity. Those who encountered it were said to lose not just their lives, but their very sense of time and reality, glimpsing a chaos older than the continents themselves. Further south, among the Zulu and Xhosa peoples, there were warnings about Tokolosh, a mischievous and often malevolent spirit. While Tokolosh stories eventually became intertwined with human affairs, trickery, illness, and nocturnal attacks, the earliest tales hint at an existence that predates humanity's dominion. These creatures, the elders claimed, were once hunters of the spirit world, able to walk unseen between trees and mountains, taking sustenance from fear and disorder. In some accounts, Tokolosh were described as shapeshifters who could appear as animals, smoke, or shadow, blending with the primordial night. Their purpose was not always to harm. Some were said to enforce the unspoken laws of the natural world, punishing those who disrupted the sacred order of rivers, forests, and the windswept plains. Across the western reaches of Africa, the Dahomey and Yoruba traditions recall the age, spirits or entities often associated with wealth, trade, and sometimes witchcraft. Yet the most ancient accounts hint at a far darker origin. The age, in the pre-human imagination, were more than patrons of human fortune. They were remnants of a chaotic age when earth and sky were in flux, when fire and water contested for dominion, and when unseen forces shaped the first trees and rivers. Early humans, encountering their traces, often mistook the signs of the age for omens or curses, never realizing that these were echoes of entities older than humankind itself. Their presence was a reminder that Africa's vast landscapes had long been the stage for beings who lived by laws incomprehensible to human reason. In East Africa, among the Maasai and Kikuyu peoples, legends of Nyami, the river god of the Zambezi, describe a colossal serpentine being that could control the tides, storms, and floods. Scholars often interpret Nyami as a deity, but older oral traditions depict it as a pre-human sentinel, a guardian of the waters who existed before humans could even name the stars. Nyami's scales were said to shimmer with visions of the first dawn, and its voice could fracture cliffs and bend rivers. Fishermen and herders, hearing the rivers roar, often attributed floods and earthquakes to Nyami's restless movement, unaware that they were witnessing the lingering presence of a primordial demon that had survived the rise of human civilization. Even the arid deserts of northern Africa tell of pre-human terrors. The Amit-like spirits described in Saharan oral lore were beasts of devouring, emerging from mirages and the scorching heat to consume travelers who dared enter forbidden dunes. These beings were not demons in the moral sense. They were natural forces personified, entities that existed before the concept of morality, justice, or human sin. They were hungry not for souls in the human sense, but for the energy of life itself, the same life that would later grow into the first tribes and civilizations along the Nile and across the Sahel. What is striking about these African pre-human demons is the way they blend the natural and the supernatural. Unlike the European or Near Eastern demons who often act as tempters or moral adversaries, African pre-human demons were more akin to elemental forces, ancient, sometimes capricious, always powerful. Their stories emphasize survival, respect for the natural world, and the fragile boundary between humans and forces far older and more complex than they could comprehend. Anthropologists have noted that many of these legends function as cultural memories of a world that predates writing and agriculture, a time when humans were not at the top of the food chain and the wilderness was alive with spirits that could obliterate the unprepared. In a sense, the pre-human demons of Africa were a warning that the earth itself has long memories, that the land is alive with forces beyond human understanding, and that the first humans were mere observers in a theater ruled by beings older than language or civilization. To this day, travelers in remote forests or along the Zambezi whisper of shadows that move with impossible speed, of strange sounds echoing across rivers, and of fleeting glimpses of creatures that defy natural explanation. These stories, often dismissed as superstition, may in fact be echoes of a world before humans, a world where pre-human demons walked the land, shaping it with their will, teaching humanity through fear, and leaving behind a legacy of cautionary tales that persist even in the age of science and satellites. The pre-human demons of Africa remind us that humanity's history is not just the story of survival and conquest, but also a story of encounters with forces far older, stranger, and more terrifying than ourselves. To understand them is to glimpse the world as it existed before humans arrived, a world where rivers spoke, mountains moved, and shadows themselves could devour. These are not simply myths, they are whispers of a time when humans were guests in a domain ruled by ancient, pre-human power. Gone.less. The Nephilim as echoes of older things. The Nephilim have long haunted the imagination of scholars, theologians, and storytellers alike. Described in the cryptic verse of Genesis 6 verse 4 as the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown, they are often cast as hybrid beings, born of the mysterious union between the sons of God and human women. Yet, beneath the veneer of myth and scripture, there lies a more unsettling possibility, that the Nephilim were not merely creatures of their own time, but echoes of even older realities, vestiges of a primordial world that humanity itself could barely comprehend. To understand the Nephilim in this light, one must first step back to the early mythic horizon. In many ancient cultures, there exists the notion of a pre-human or semi-divine age, where beings of enormous power and peculiar form walked the earth. Mesopotamian texts, like the Sumerian king list, speak of kings and demigods reigning for tens of thousands of years, bridging the gap between heaven and earth. In some accounts, these figures are described as taller than ordinary men, imbued with knowledge that humans would later only rediscover as legend. The Nephilim, in this sense, may represent the last visible traces of this older order, a fleeting shadow of a time before the world as we know it had fully taken shape. The very word Nephilim carries this sense of displacement. Scholars have debated its roots, connecting it either to the Hebrew root NPL, to fall, or to concepts of oppression and overwhelming strength. If derived from fallen ones, the Nephilim may not only signify literal giants, but also beings who had fallen from a previous cosmic or spiritual hierarchy, a hierarchy predating humanity itself. This interpretation aligns with certain strands of Jewish mysticism, in which the Nephilim are viewed as remnants of the Watcher's rebellion, fragments of an earlier creation that sought to impose itself upon a nascent humanity. In this reading, they are less historical figures and more echoing presences, reminders of forces that once shaped reality itself, now haunting the margins of human memory. Archaeology and paleontology have occasionally fueled this imagination. From gigantic bones unearthed in ancient digs, often misidentified or exaggerated, to the folklore of towering humans in early cultures, humanity has repeatedly glimpsed its own past through distorted reflections. Could these stories reflect encounters with beings outside the human norm, or are they symbolic remnants of a collective memory? Some modern researchers suggest that myths of the Nephilim, Titans, or other colossal entities may encode cultural memory of older things, pre-human entities that once walked the earth alongside early life. In this light, the Nephilim are not simply biblical curiosities, but narrative echoes of an older ecological and spiritual order that humanity was only beginning to inherit. Even in biblical context, the Nephilim seem to straddle two realities. They are described as terrifying in their strength, yet they are ephemeral, almost ghostly in their appearance within the text. Genesis offers no detailed account of their origins or ultimate fate. Numbers 13:33, where the Israelite spies claim, "We saw the Nephilim there, and we seemed like grasshoppers," presents them as a lingering presence, monumental and alien, yet already fading into legend. This sense of liminality reinforces the idea that the Nephilim represent something that predates humanity's dominion, an older pattern of existence briefly intersecting with human history before vanishing. The Nephilim's hybridity also hints at a deeper symbolic resonance. They are described as part divine, part human, existing on a threshold between realms. In the stories of creation and the fall, boundaries matter. The divine is set apart from the human, the natural from the supernatural. The Nephilim, by crossing these boundaries, embody a memory of worlds before these distinctions were fully drawn. In this sense, they are echoes not just of physical beings, but of the metaphysical structures of an older cosmos, a cosmos in which the rules of life, death, and hierarchy were less rigid, and in which beings like the Watchers could reshape the very fabric of existence. Mystical and apocryphal texts expand upon this vision. The Book of Enoch, for instance, elaborates on the corruption wrought by the Watchers, describing Nephilim who devoured the fruits of the earth, slaughtered animals, and sowed chaos among humans. These stories cast them as agents of entropy, forces that prefigured the flood, the divine reset of human history. Yet even in their violence, there is a strange dignity. The Nephilim are survivors of an older world, caught in a cycle they cannot fully understand. Their existence is tragic, haunting, and deeply resonant, a reminder of the layers of life that existed before human civilization began to impose its order. Viewed symbolically, the Nephilim as echoes of older things also speak to the human psyche. The fascination with giants, monsters, and pre-human entities reflects an awareness of our own smallness in the cosmic scale. By imagining beings that existed before us, humans recognize the limits of their knowledge and the brevity of their dominion. The Nephilim serve as a bridge between what has been and what is, a mirror in which we glimpse the vast, unrecorded stretches of time, and the powers that once held sway before we ever walked the earth. Ultimately, the Nephilim remain enigmatic because they are, in a sense, incomplete. They are not entirely of our world, nor entirely of another. They exist in the interstices of memory, myth, and text, a living echo of older things. To encounter them, even in imagination, is to confront the shadow of a primordial reality, to feel the weight of ancient forces brushing against the fragile fabric of human history. They remind us that the world we inhabit is layered, palimpsestic, and haunted by the shapes of beings who came before us. In the end, the Nephilim may not be giants of flesh alone, but giants of memory and myth, vestiges of older realities whose echoes persist, whispering across the ages. Their story is a cautionary one, a tale of power and hubris, but also a testament to the enduring fascination humans have with what lies beyond the threshold of understanding, a threshold that, perhaps, we are only beginning to glimpse. The demons of the deep earth. Beneath the crust of our world, in the shadowed corridors where no sunlight penetrates, dwell creatures that few dare to imagine. Ancient texts and folklore alike speak of these subterranean entities, demons of the deep earth, neither wholly corporeal nor entirely spectral, whose existence predates humanity itself. They are said to inhabit the molten veins of the planet, the caverns of obsidian and basalt, and the vast networks of tunnels that pierce the planet's core. Some call them gogmagogs, others nurgles or netherfiends, but all accounts agree on their uncanny, almost alien nature. Descriptions vary across cultures, yet patterns emerge. These beings are often depicted as massive, serpentine, or worm-like, with bodies armored like stone yet flowing like liquid magma. Their eyes, when glimpsed, burn with an inner fire that can paralyze mortals with terror or, in rare cases, awaken forbidden knowledge. Unlike terrestrial predators, these demons do not hunt for sustenance in a conventional sense. They feed on vibrations, heat, and the energy of life itself. Some accounts suggest they draw strength from the very tectonic activity of the earth, influencing earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and even the movement of subterranean rivers. The legends of the deep earth demons are surprisingly consistent across civilizations. The Sumerians spoke of Ker, a monstrous underworld serpent who guarded the nether gates and devoured any who dared trespass. In ancient India, the Nagas, sometimes malevolent, sometimes neutral, were said to dwell in the underworld rivers, controlling both riches and destruction. European alchemical texts reference igneous spirits, entities bound within stone and metal, capable of warping reality if summoned or angered. In every narrative, these creatures existed long before human cities or empires, suggesting they belong to a primordial era when the earth itself was young, volatile, and alive in ways we cannot fully comprehend. Modern interpretations blend myth with the science of geology and seismology. Researchers studying deep-focus earthquakes, those that originate hundreds of kilometers below the crust, have noted phenomena that defy simple explanation. Instruments detect bursts of energy that seem to move with intent, almost as though guided by a sentient force. Ancient myths of deep earth demons could be symbolic interpretations of these natural events, preserving in allegorical form the knowledge that the earth is alive and reactive. But to those who have ventured into the planet's deepest caverns, reports of strange lights, inexplicable warmth, and the sensation of being watched suggest that the legends might be grounded in more than metaphor. The demons of the deep are also said to be custodians of forbidden knowledge. In some traditions, particularly those rooted in Jewish mysticism and apocryphal texts, the underworld is a repository of pre-human wisdom and secrets of creation. Certain demon lords of the subterranean realms are believed to remember the formative moments of the planet, the shaping of mountains, the first flows of lava, the birth of oceans. To glimpse them or survive an encounter is to confront truths no human mind is prepared to hold. In this sense, these beings are both terrifying and seductive, offering power and understanding at the cost of one's sanity or one's soul. Encounters with deep earth demons are rarely described in detail, yet recurring themes emerge. Explorers report a profound sense of wrongness, as if stepping outside the boundaries of reality. The air grows thick and metallic, walls seem to breathe, and the very earth pulses beneath one's feet. Sounds, low, guttural vibrations, resonate in ways the human ear cannot fully register, a harmonic echo of the planet itself. Some who claim to have seen these creatures describe forms that defy Euclidean geometry, bodies that shift, elongate, and contort in impossible ways. They are described as conscious, aware, and capable of intent, yet operating on a scale and perception entirely alien to human experience. A particularly chilling account comes from the Carpathian Mountains, where miners working in ancient salt tunnels spoke of enormous, worm-like entities gliding silently through the rock. One miner, whose journal survived decades later, claimed the creature communicated through vibrations, conveying visions of cataclysmic eruptions and civilizations swallowed by the earth. Whether this was hallucination induced by toxic gases, deep psychological stress, or a genuine encounter remains a matter of speculation, but the imagery mirrors motifs found in texts from Mesopotamia, Egypt, and even the Americas. There is a pattern: deep earth demons appear at the thresholds of human understanding, guardians of the liminal space between the known world and the unthinkable. Interestingly, the demons are not always malevolent in the conventional sense. Some traditions regard them as keepers, enforcing the boundaries of the subterranean realms. Trespassers who stumble too far into the earth risk triggering their wrath, but those who respect the natural order, who enter with humility or purpose, might receive guidance or protection. This duality reinforces the idea that deep earth demons are fundamentally alien, neither good nor evil by human standards, but existing according to principles entirely their own. Throughout history, humans have sought to harness the power of these subterranean beings, often with disastrous consequences. Alchemists attempted to summon igneous spirits, to forge gold or control fire. Occultists of the 19th century claimed to communicate with entities beneath volcanoes and salt mines, interpreting their answers as prophecies. In every case, the stories end with destruction, madness, or disappearance, reinforcing the notion that the deep earth demons are not to be trifled with. Their realm is a mirror of the earth itself, magnificent, dangerous, and wholly indifferent to human ambition. In modern culture, these entities have inspired countless works of fiction, from Lovecraftian horrors to subterranean thrillers. While the storytelling may exaggerate or embellish, the essence remains: beneath our feet lies a realm of incomprehensible life, older than humanity, teeming with forces that remind us of our fragile place in the world. Whether they are literal beings, metaphors for geologic and psychological forces, or both, the demons of the deep earth continue to capture the imagination and fear of those who dare to explore the hidden layers of our planet. As we contemplate these ancient subterranean entities, it becomes clear that humanity's fascination with the deep earth is not merely about curiosity. It is about confronting the unknown, respecting the power of a world older and more mysterious than we can fully grasp, and acknowledging that our history is just a thin veneer atop a vastly older, wilder reality. The demons of the deep are the Earth's oldest custodians, and their story reminds us that the world beneath us is as alive, dangerous, and enigmatic as the cosmos above. The nameless ones of the deep void. Even before the rise of humanity, the universe was not silent. In the unseen folds of creation, in spaces that mortal eyes could never penetrate, entities existed whose nature defied comprehension. These were not angels, nor demons in any traditional sense. They were older, stranger, and far more enigmatic, the nameless ones of the deep void. They inhabited the spaces between realities, the black currents of pre-time, and the liminal zones where existence and non-existence blurred. To call them creatures is a betrayal of their essence. They were not bound by flesh, form, or even the faint outlines of logic that shaped the cosmos. The earliest accounts of these beings come not from human history, but from the whispers of the Watchers, those angelic observers who themselves would eventually fall. In the forbidden texts that survived the cataclysms of pre-human civilizations, these entities were referred to only in trembling code or circular symbols, for even the angels feared naming them. To utter their names aloud, it was said, risked unraveling the mind, as their reality was utterly alien to any being bound by linear time or physical existence. The deep void, where these entities dwelled, was not merely empty space. It was a dark ocean of raw potential, where the building blocks of universes sloshed in chaotic eddies. Here, the Nameless Ones moved without movement, their presence felt more as a shift in reality than as an apparition. Time bent around them, causality wavered. To encounter one was to confront the possibility that the very concept of self might be irrelevant. The ancient records describe sensations rather than sightings, a dissonant hum that vibrated in the soul, a pressure that seemed to squeeze the air from the cosmos itself, and a cold darkness that did not merely chill the flesh but froze thought itself. Some texts hint that these beings were progenitors of other entities that would later populate the universe. The Watchers, in their obsessive curiosity, allegedly attempted to study them, seeking to extract knowledge of creation and destruction. But the Nameless Ones were not subjects to be studied. Their awareness was not intelligence as angels or humans understood it, but a vast, indifferent pattern, an omnipresent force that consumed knowledge simply by existing. Angels who approached too closely were said to vanish, their forms absorbed into the void, leaving only echoes of thought behind, fragmented visions of infinite geometries and impossible symmetries that no mind could fully hold. What drove the Nameless Ones is unknowable. They were neither benevolent nor malevolent. Morality was a meaningless category in the deep void. Yet, their interactions with the cosmos left traces. Pre-human worlds bore the subtle scars of their passage, oceans that swirled with impossible currents, mountains that twisted against the laws of gravity, skies that shimmered with auroras unseen in later epochs. Some scholars of forbidden lore suggest that the cosmic anomalies recorded in ancient civilizations, texts describing sky serpents that swallowed stars or dark angels that birthed firestorms, were echoes of the Nameless Ones' movements, interpreted through human perception as myths and legends. The human imagination, when it first arose, could only dream of them. Across cultures, these whispers became the earliest depictions of chaos spirits, void dwellers, or primordial monsters. In Mesopotamia, they were hinted at in the terrifying abyssal creatures that Tiamat commanded, in Sumerian texts, as forces of unstructured chaos lurking beyond creation. The biblical tradition preserves a shadow of them in the language of Leviathan and Rariab, not fully real in the mortal sense, yet existing as a terror beyond comprehension. The boundaries between angel, demon, and these void beings were blurred in early accounts, because the human mind lacked the vocabulary for entities that defied existence itself. One of the more chilling qualities of the Nameless Ones was their apparent influence on the so-called pre-human intellects, the first proto-minds to rise before humankind. These early entities, curious and chaotic themselves, encountered fragments of the Nameless One's essence. Some scholars speculate that the first sparks of consciousness, the earliest whispers of self-awareness in the universe, were not purely natural, but shaped subtly by the unknowable patterns of these void entities. This influence may explain the strange mix of order and madness present in later celestial beings and in the mythical demons that haunted human imagination, a shadow of the infinite creeping into the finite. Legends also suggest that these beings had a form of cosmic memory. Unlike humans, whose memories were linear and bound to their lifetime, the Nameless Ones retained echoes of entire universes, both destroyed and unrealized. In certain apocryphal texts, it is recorded that fallen angels glimpsed fragments of these memories and were driven to despair or madness. One particularly cryptic account describes a watcher seeing 1,000 suns extinguished before ever rising, and 1,000 lives never breathed into being, all folded into the silence of the void, causing him to tremble in a terror deeper than death itself. Such descriptions emphasize that human fear of the unknown is grounded in this very interaction. The mind instinctively recoils from knowledge too vast to contain. Interestingly, the Nameless Ones were not universally destructive. They did not create in the human sense, nor did they destroy with intent. Their existence was a state of being, an unceasing oscillation between form and non-form. Any perceived intervention in the cosmos was incidental, a ripple in the infinite currents they inhabited. Yet, for mortals and angels alike, such incidental ripples were enough to seem like cataclysm, enough to inspire fear, worship, or desperate attempts at appeasement. The human myths of gods of the void, underworld deities, and primordial chaos are likely cultural echoes of these encounters filtered through imagination and the limitations of perception. By the time humans emerged, the nameless ones had receded further into the void, becoming ever more difficult to sense or affect. Still, their presence lingered as a latent tension in creation, a reminder that the universe is vast beyond understanding, and that life, time, and matter are but fragile constructs hovering over an endless, dark sea. In many ways, they represent the ultimate lesson of pre-human cosmology, that existence is not inherently meaningful, that consciousness is fragile, and that the unknown, whatever form it may take, can dwarf the greatest of beings, mortal or immortal. To contemplate the nameless ones is to confront the limits of comprehension. They are, in essence, the silent witnesses of reality's birth and decay, indifferent observers of all creation's unfolding. Yet, for humanity, they remain the most terrifying possibility, that some truths, some entities, are so utterly alien that our very minds cannot withstand them, and that some corners of existence are forever barred from human understanding. Tiamat's brood, monsters older than Earth. Long before the first mountains rose and before the oceans filled with life, there existed chaos, a swirling, primordial void where nothing obeyed the laws of time or space. From this turbulent expanse arose Tiamat, the great dragon of Mesopotamian myth, mother of monsters and embodiment of cosmic disorder. Unlike creatures born from Earth, her brood existed in a realm untouched by gravity, sunlight, or the cycles of mortality. These beings were not mere animals, they were elemental forces, each a living symbol of creation's raw potential and destructive capacity. Tiamat's children were terrifyingly diverse. Some were massive, serpentine creatures whose scales shimmered with the essence of starlight, their eyes burning like distant suns. Others were shapeless horrors, shifting constantly between forms, evading comprehension by any mind bound to linear thought. Among them were leviathans of unimaginable size, whose movements could ripple the very fabric of reality, and shadow beasts that whispered secrets of existence into the void. Ancient texts describe them as the firstborn of chaos, creatures that preceded Earth itself and, in some interpretations, even the gods who later shaped the cosmos. One of the most infamous of Tiamat's brood was Uzumgal, the great serpent of primeval waters. Uzumgal's body stretched beyond the understanding of human perception, winding through the formless sea of the early cosmos. Legends suggest that it breathed storms instead of air, and its roar could split stars in two. In some Akkadian myths, Uzumgal was not merely a monster but a co-creator of the universe, shaping the first oceans and rivers through its violent movements. Its essence remained imprinted in every tidal wave and flood long after the cosmos settled into order. Another of Tiamat's children was Muma, the exalted serpent, a hybrid of dragon and cosmic storm. Unlike the terrestrial dragons that appear later in human folklore, Muma could exist in multiple planes at once, simultaneously inhabiting time, matter, and energy. To witness it was to see one's mind fracture. Those rare mortals or deities who glimpsed its form described sensations that transcended fear, a recognition of one's own insignificance in the vast, chaotic architecture of reality. Muma's attacks were not physical in the usual sense. It tore through patterns of probability, undoing what would exist before it could manifest, leaving behind entire timelines that had never been. Some of Tiamat's brood were even stranger. The Kingu, often depicted in myth as the commander of her armies, carried the blueprint of life itself. Though mythologists usually present Kingu as a malevolent adversary slain by Marduk, in the deeper, older traditions he was a primordial architect, a creature whose very blood contained the seeds of planets, stars, and living beings. When Marduk defeated him, some myths suggest that the act of creating humanity from his blood was less an act of dominance and more a desperate attempt to impose order upon creatures whose very existence defied structure. Thus, in a sense, humanity inherited a fragment of Tiamat's chaotic progeny. Not all of her brood were destructive in a direct sense. Some were guardians of thresholds, existing between dimensions to maintain the balance of the cosmos. Known collectively in obscure texts as the Watchers of the Void, these entities were beyond alignment of good or evil. They simply were manifestations of forces that preceded morality, culture, or even life itself. Some scholars theorize that the nightmares experienced by early humans, those that inspired legends of demons and shadow spirits, were echoes of these ancient watchers attempting to interact with the material world. What makes Tiamat's brood particularly fascinating is their resistance to linear time. While earthbound creatures have lifespans, cycles, and mortality, her children existed in a form of eternal flux. They could witness the birth and death of stars as casually as one might watch a candle burn. Some myths even suggest that remnants of these creatures survived the cosmic battles that led to Earth's formation, hidden in the deepest oceans or in the uncharted voids between galaxies. Could the strange, massive organisms glimpsed in the Mariana Trench or the sudden appearances of cryptids be distorted remnants of these primordial entities? Mythology allows for such speculation, but the possibility hints at a universe in which life predates Earth and continues to exist in forms wholly alien to human understanding. The clash between Tiamat's brood and the emerging order of gods forms the centerpiece of the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic. Marduk's rise was not simply a political victory, it represented the imposition of structured reality upon forces that had never known limits. Each of Tiamat's defeated children became a building block, her body formed the heavens and earth, her blood created humanity, and even her most monstrous progeny were repurposed to maintain cosmic balance. Yet, paradoxically, her brood was never fully destroyed. Their essence lingered, encoded into the fabric of existence itself. Chaos, it seems, is never entirely vanquished, it merely shifts form. By studying these myths, we begin to understand the mindset of the ancient Mesopotamians. They lived in a world they perceived as fragile, where unseen forces could erase villages, flood rivers, or warp human destiny. Tiamat and her brood symbolized these forces in their most extreme form, monstrous, eternal, and terrifyingly intelligent. They were older than mountains, older than the sky, and, in some sense, older than humanity's earliest gods. Even today, when we consider the mysteries of the deep ocean, the vastness of space, or the unexplained phenomena of the natural world, the shadow of Tiamat's children looms, reminding us that monsters older than Earth itself may never be entirely gone. Tiamat's brood is more than myth. They are a window into how ancient humans conceptualized the universe before it was tamed by science, theology, or philosophy. They teach us that chaos is not merely destructive, it is primordial, creative, and eternal. And perhaps, somewhere beyond the veil of perception, remnants of these ancient beings still drift through the cosmos, waiting for the next ripple of time to awaken them once more. Prologue, before flesh, before names. Before there was form, before there was light to pierce the void, there existed only the murmurs of potential. Not sound, not thought, but a restless, simmering tension between what could be and what was. From this primordial haze, the first stirrings of consciousness whispered across the nothingness. They were not angels, nor demons, nor creatures recognizable to any mind yet, they were simply beings of intent, shaped by the unformed chaos around them. Names, of course, had not yet been spoken. Names are born of recognition, of fear, of desire. In this early epoch, recognition had no meaning, and fear was an inert spark, unable to ignite. The entities moved without purpose, drifting and weaving through the formless currents, as if the void itself were a vast ocean of possibility. They sensed one another in ways that no language could capture, glimpsing the outlines of otherness in a space that had no edges. Some of these beings were drawn to the resonance of others, forming clusters of motion that hinted at intention. These gatherings were the first semblance of society, though it was not society as humanity would later know it. There was no morality, no law, only the interplay of power and subtle curiosity. From these interactions, the first hierarchies emerged. Not rulers, not kings, but entities whose mere presence bent the currents around them. Where one being willed a shape into the void, others recoiled or conformed, creating a delicate lattice of influence. It was during this time that the first stirrings of hunger appeared. Not hunger for flesh or blood, but a craving for essence itself, the raw vibration of being. Some entities discovered that they could draw from others, siphoning vitality like light from a darkened sun. Others recoiled, instinctively sensing the danger in this interaction, yet unable to resist its lure. And so, long before names or faces, a predator and prey dynamic unfurled silently across the formless sea. The void, however, was not entirely passive. It responded to these stirrings with subtle shifts in temperature, pressure, and resonance. Currents formed and dissipated, guiding some beings toward each other and pushing others apart. It was as if the void were a hidden architect, experimenting with the tension between entities, molding them without direct intervention. From this cosmic dance emerged patterns that would echo across eternity, the earliest hints of structure before creation had fully congealed. One entity, unlike the others, seemed attuned to the void more deeply than most. Its form was fluid, indistinct, and yet it radiated a magnetic presence that drew others near. When it moved, the currents themselves seemed to pulse in rhythm, as though the universe responded to its very heartbeat. Some of the other entities attempted to mimic it, to grasp the allure, but their efforts were clumsy. The entity, in turn, observed the attempts without judgment, simply noting the vibrations of intent as they collided and overlapped. In this pre-named epoch, there were no battles in the human sense, yet conflicts arose naturally. Entities that drew too much essence from others faced subtle resistance. Currents would twist around them, siphoning some of their power back, sometimes violently, sometimes almost imperceptibly. These were the first skirmishes, the prelude to conflict that would one day define the world of flesh and bone. Here, before form, the stakes were invisibly high, and the consequences eternal. Occasionally, a being would pause and create. Not intentionally, not consciously, but as a reflex of its own essence. A ripple in the void would condense into a shape, an echo of what might one day be a body, a form, a mask. These proto-creatures floated, drifting without awareness, as if dreaming into existence. They lacked identity, yet the entities around them responded instinctively. Some gathered around these emergent shapes, drawn by the possibility of communion. Others lingered at the edges, wary of the unknown. And some, driven by the nascent hunger that had first stirred, consumed these shapes outright, absorbing the flicker of being they represented. It was in this liminal space that the first ideas of individuality began to take hold. Not the individuality of humans, not the ego of flesh, but the recognition that one's vibration could be distinct from the currents around it. Entities experimented with separation and cohesion, exploring how much they could assert themselves without unraveling the delicate balance of the void. Those that mastered this subtle dance gained a measure of dominance, not over others, but over the currents themselves. They could bend the void to a degree, shaping the flow of potential in ways that were both mesmerizing and terrifying. Time in this epoch was neither linear nor cyclical, it simply was, stretching and folding in on itself like waves on an endless shore. Some entities perceived these folds as patterns, guiding their interactions. Others existed in a state of pure flux, unable or unwilling to anchor themselves in any rhythm. It is tempting, in retrospect, to imagine that the seeds of history were planted here, before names, before flesh, before memory. Every act, every ripple, every consumption and creation, left an imprint on the void that would resurface again and again in the forms that were yet to come. Yet, for all the experimentation, there was an undercurrent of inevitability. The void seemed to harbor an unspoken law: what emerges will eventually be given shape, what drifts without name will eventually be bound by identity, and what hungers without restraint will inevitably collide with others who hunger just as deeply. This law was not a command, it was a natural consequence of the interplay between potential and presence, a force neither cruel nor benevolent, simply unavoidable. In these first movements, the ancestors of all later horrors and marvels took form. They were not yet demons, nor angels, nor beasts, they were echoes of what would one day be. Hungry, curious, aware, yet not yet tethered to the flesh that would define them. Each ripple, each surge of intent, contributed to the ever-growing lattice of being, a prelude to the chaos and wonder that would one day spill into the world of humanity. Before names were spoken, before flesh took form, before the stars themselves had been seeded, the universe trembled with life in its most abstract, most terrifying, and most sublime state. If these demon creatures existed before humanity, then their greatest fear was never destruction, it was being replaced. Ancient myths across the world agree on one unsettling truth: these beings didn't vanish, they were sealed away, forgotten, or forced into the shadows as humanity inherited the earth. And perhaps their stories survive because they are not finished with us yet. The question is not whether they existed, but whether they are truly gone. Thank you for watching and exploring the darkest corners of forgotten history with us. If you enjoyed this journey, stay curious, and stay watchful.